Nicholas Hayes walked through the cold, deserted streets of New York City, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets. The chilly wind whipped across his face, but it was nothing compared to the coldness that had settled inside him years ago. His mind wandered, as it often did during these late-night walks, to the choices he had made. Choices that led him to a life of isolation, wealth beyond measure, but with no one to share it with. As he passed a dimly lit alley, something caught his eye, a small figure moving slowly. He stopped, squinting into the shadows. There, under a flickering street lamp, was a girl, no more than 17, holding a baby wrapped in a dirty blanket. She looked fragile, worn out, as if the weight of the world had crushed her. Nicholas hesitated for a moment, instinct telling him to walk away. But something about her, something in the way she clutched the baby to her chest, pulled him closer. Without thinking, he approached. "Hey," he said softly, trying not to startle her. Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear, backing away slightly. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. She tightened her grip on the baby, her body visibly shaking in the cold. "I'm Nicholas," he said, keeping his distance, his voice calm. "You look like you need help." She said nothing, just stared at him with distrust, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. "Look, I don't mean to scare you," Nicholas continued, lowering his tone, "but it's freezing out here, and that baby, he's not going to survive the night if you stay outside." The girl's face twisted in pain, and she looked down at the child in her arms. She knew he was right. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, trying to keep her composure. "Why would you care?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "You don't even know me." Nicholas exhaled slowly. "I don't," he admitted, "but I've been through some things. I can help you if you let me." For a long moment, the only sound between them was the faint cry of the baby. Nicholas could see the indecision in her eyes. She was scared, but she was also desperate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded slightly. "Okay," she whispered. Nicholas stepped forward cautiously, removing his coat. "Here," he said, draping it around her shoulders. "Let's get you both warm." As they made their way to his black sedan parked nearby, Nicholas glanced at her again, trying to make sense of the feelings stirring inside him. She reminded him of something, someone, from a lifetime ago. But it wasn't just that. There was something about her situation that felt familiar, almost painfully so. When they reached his mansion, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city, the girl hesitated again at the door. "You can trust me," Nicholas said softly, sensing her fear. "What's your name?" She looked up at him, her eyes tired and guarded. "Lily," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily Bennett." Nicholas opened the door, allowing her to step inside. "You're safe now, Lily," he said, trying to convince himself as much as her. But deep down, he knew that the storm had only just begun. The next morning, Nicholas awoke to a strange quiet that filled his mansion, a silence that had grown familiar over the years. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, and for a brief moment, the events of the previous night felt like a distant dream. But the memory of Lily's tired face and the baby's soft cries came rushing back, anchoring him in reality. He quickly dressed and made his way downstairs. As he entered the living room, he saw Lily standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds. She held the baby close, rocking him gently, but her face was etched with tension, her eyes distant. "Good morning," Nicholas greeted softly, not wanting to startle her. Lily turned, her expression guarded. "Morning," she murmured, shifting uneasily on her feet. Before Nicholas could say anything else, the sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. He frowned, not expecting any visitors. The butler, who had silently appeared from one of the adjacent rooms, went to answer the door. Moments later, he returned with a serious look on his face. "Sir," the butler said, "there are two people here, an officer and a woman from child services. They say it's urgent." Nicholas felt a cold weight settle in his stomach as he exchanged a brief glance with Lily. Her face drained of color, and she instinctively tightened her hold on the baby, backing away slightly. "Let them in," Nicholas said, his voice calm but laced with tension. The front door opened, and a tall police officer entered, followed closely by a woman in her early 30s, dressed in a smart but stern business suit. She introduced herself as Jessica Harper, a social worker, her eyes flickering between Nicholas and Lily with a mix of suspicion and concern. "Nicholas Hayes?" Jessica asked, her tone professional but direct. "That's right," Nicholas replied, his gaze never leaving hers. "What's going on?" Jessica stepped forward, holding a file in her hands. "We received a report last night about a missing child. This baby," she said, pointing at the small bundle in Lily's arms, "might be involved in a possible abduction." Lily gasped, her face twisting in shock and horror. "What? No, that's not true." Her voice cracked with panic as she took a step back, her body trembling. Nicholas stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. He turned to Jessica. "There must be a mistake. Lily is just a girl trying to survive." "I understand this is a sensitive situation," Jessica interrupted, her voice firm, "but we have reason to believe the baby might have been taken from his family." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she desperately shook her head. "No, you don't understand. I didn't take him. I'm protecting him." Her voice was rising, filled with desperation. "Please, you have to believe me. He's in danger. There are people who want to hurt him." Jessica glanced at the officer beside her, exchanging a look that suggested they had heard similar stories before. "Lily, if you want to explain yourself, now's the time," Jessica said, her voice softening just a little. "But we need to get to the bottom of this." Nicholas felt the weight of the room's tension suffocate him as he stood between them, unsure of what to believe. He looked at Lily, seeing the raw fear in her eyes, and then back at Jessica, whose expression remained unwavering. "Lily," Nicholas began, his voice low and steady, "you have to tell me the truth. What is going on?" Lily's lower lip trembled as she clutched the baby closer to her chest. "I swear, I'm telling the truth. I didn't kidnap him. I can't go into details, but if I give him up, he'll die." Her voice was a choked whisper, filled with urgency and fear. Nicholas's mind swirled with doubt. What if she was lying? What if the police were right? He had welcomed her into his home, trusted her with a fragile instinct he hadn't felt in years. But now, with the law staring him down, he began to question everything. Jessica took a step forward, her voice growing firmer. "Nicholas, we need to take Lily and the baby into custody while we investigate this further." "It's the law." "No," Lily cried, backing away toward the door. Her eyes darted toward Nicholas, pleading, "Please, don't let them take him. You promised we'd be safe here. Please." Nicholas felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him, the weight of his past mistakes suddenly crashing back into his thoughts. He couldn't shake the memory of another woman, long ago, whose life had unraveled because of his choices. Could he trust Lily? Or was he letting his emotions cloud his judgment? "Lily," Nicholas said slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "If you're telling the truth, we'll find a way to protect you. But I need you to be honest with me. Right now." Tears streamed down Lily's face as she shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't tell you everything. Not yet." The officer stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Sir, we need to take them in. This isn't a negotiation." Nicholas turned to face Jessica and the officer, feeling the weight of the decision on his shoulders. "Give me some time to figure this out," he said, his tone firm but not confrontational. Jessica hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "You have until the end of the day. After that, we'll have no choice but to intervene." As the officer and Jessica left, Nicholas stood in the hallway, the silence pressing in around him. Lily, still holding the baby tightly, sank to the floor, her sobs quiet but filled with pain. Nicholas stared down at her, his mind a storm of doubt and fear. For the first time in years, he found himself at the center of something far bigger than he'd ever anticipated, something that stirred long-buried feelings he wasn't ready to face. And as he looked at Lily, he realized that whatever came next, trust would be a fragile, dangerous thing. The tension in the mansion had become palpable by the time the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the sprawling estate. Nicholas paced back and forth in his office, his mind racing. Jessica Harper's warning echoed in his thoughts. "You have until the end of the day." He knew that the police would return soon, but his instincts told him there was more to Lily's story than she was revealing. He couldn't shake the feeling that her arrival, this situation, and the sudden chaos it brought weren't just random coincidences. Nicholas sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen, his fingers hovering over the keys. He had quietly begun his own investigation into Lily, hoping to find something that would explain the mess they were in. After hours of searching through obscure databases and records, Nicholas came across something that made his heart stop: a name. It was a name he hadn't spoken or thought about in years, buried deep in the recesses of a life he had tried to forget. Rebecca Bennett. A flood of memories came crashing back. Rebecca had been his first love, a vibrant and beautiful woman whose laughter had once filled his world. They had met when he was young and reckless, back when his ambition drove him to make choices that had destroyed everything they had together. He had always assumed she had moved on, but he hadn't seen or heard from her in nearly 2 decades. He scrolled further, reading the details of her life. She had passed away, recently. His breath caught in his throat. The shock of her death struck him harder than he expected. He hadn't realized how much he still carried the weight of their unfinished story. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Lily was Rebecca's daughter. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, stunned. Lily Bennett wasn't just a random girl he had helped on the street. She was the daughter of the woman he had once loved, the woman whose life he had abandoned in pursuit of his career. Nicholas ran a hand over his face, his thoughts a whirlwind. He stood up abruptly and walked toward the living room, where Lily sat curled on the couch, the baby asleep in her arms. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but she looked up when she heard him enter the room. "Lily," Nicholas began, trying to keep his voice steady. "I need to ask you something. About your mother." Lily tensed, her body stiffening at the mention of her mother. She stared at Nicholas, a flicker of recognition crossing her face, as if she had been waiting for this conversation. "My mom. She talked about you," Lily said softly, her voice trembling. "She told me stories about a man she once loved. A man who left her, left us." Nicholas swallowed hard, guilt clawing at his chest. "Rebecca," he whispered, his heart heavy with the weight of her name. "Your mother was. She was everything to me once. But I made mistakes. I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" Lily interrupted, her voice sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. "That you had a daughter? That you left us to struggle, while you lived in your mansion with your perfect life." Nicholas stood frozen, unable to find the words. The pain in Lily's eyes was raw, and it cut him deeply. He hadn't known. He hadn't even thought about the possibility that Rebecca had a child, let alone that it might be his. He had buried that part of his life so completely that he had forgotten the consequences of his decisions. "I'm sorry," Nicholas finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know." Lily laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You didn't care to know. You walked away, Nicholas. And now, my mom's gone, and I'm left trying to protect this baby from people who want to destroy us." Nicholas felt the floor beneath him shift. "What do you mean, people who want to destroy you? What's really going on, Lily?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering with hesitation and fear. But then she sighed, as if finally deciding to trust him, at least for a moment. "My mom. She was sick for a long time. After she died, I found out that the people she had been working for were dangerous. They're involved in things I can't even explain. I don't know why, but they want the baby, badly. I had to run. I couldn't let them get him." Nicholas frowned, trying to piece it all together. "Who are they? And why do they want the baby?" "I don't know everything," Lily said, her voice breaking, "but they're powerful. They have connections, politicians, businesses. They think the baby is part of some revenge plot that goes back to things my mom was involved in. She didn't tell me everything before she died. She was trying to protect me, but now they're after me." After him. Nicholas felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just about Lily's tragic past or Rebecca's death. This was something far more dangerous, something that had spiraled out of control long before Nicholas had even stepped into it. "Lily, why didn't you tell me all of this before?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Lily wiped away the tears from her cheeks. Because I wasn't sure I could trust you. I thought you'd turn me over to the police. Or worse, I thought you might be one of them." Nicholas recoiled at the thought. "I would never. I'm not that man anymore, Lily." She stared at him, studying his face, searching for the truth in his eyes. "I didn't know that. I only knew what my mom told me, that you left us when we needed you the most." Nicholas felt the weight of her words like a punch to the gut. He couldn't change the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could do something to fix this now. He stood up, his resolve hardening. "We're going to figure this out," Nicholas said, his voice firm. "I'll protect you. Both of you. Whatever this is, we'll face it together." Lily looked at him, her expression a mix of hope and disbelief. "Why would you help us now, after everything?" Nicholas knelt down in front of her, his eyes filled with determination. "Because I should have helped you years ago, and because I owe it to your mother." For a brief moment, there was silence between them, an understanding, unspoken but felt deeply. But as the moment passed, Nicholas knew that time was running out. The danger that haunted Lily and the baby was getting closer, and they had to act fast. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mansion into shadows. But Nicholas knew that the real darkness was still lurking, waiting to strike. And this time, he wouldn't let it catch him off guard. Night had fully settled over the mansion, but inside, Nicholas couldn't find a moment of peace. The weight of the revelation, that Lily was the daughter of Rebecca, the woman he had loved and lost, was suffocating. He sat across from her in the dimly lit living room, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Lily clutched the baby to her chest, her eyes distant and filled with an exhaustion that seemed to go beyond the physical. Nicholas knew there was more to her story, more she hadn't yet revealed. He could feel it in the way her eyes flinched when she spoke of her past, the way her voice trembled when she mentioned the people chasing her. Finally, Nicholas broke the silence. "Lily, there's something you're still not telling me. I need to know the whole truth if I'm going to protect you. What really happened to your mother? Why are these people after you?" Lily's shoulders tensed, and she looked down at the baby in her arms. "I told you already," she said quietly. "They want the baby. They think he's part of some revenge scheme." Nicholas leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "That's not enough, Lily. There's more, isn't there? You said they were after your mother, too. What did she get involved in?" Lily hesitated, her grip tightening on the baby. "You wouldn't understand," she whispered. "Try me," Nicholas replied, his eyes never leaving hers. She glanced up at him, her expression torn. After a long pause, she let out a shaky breath and began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mom. She was trying to escape from something. Someone. Long before she got sick. She was involved with people who were powerful, dangerous. I never knew the full details, but I think it had to do with money and secrets she found out about. After you left her, she fell into debt, and, well, she got desperate." Nicholas clenched his fists, guilt twisting in his gut. He had walked away from Rebecca when she needed him most, blinded by his ambition. And now, he was staring at the consequences of those choices in the face of her daughter. Lily continued, her voice cracking. "She worked for a man named Victor Talbot. He was into all kinds of illegal stuff, blackmail, extortion, things I didn't fully understand. But one day, she found out something she wasn't supposed to know. She never told me exactly what it was, but after that, everything changed. She said we had to run, and we did. For years, we were hiding, moving from one place to another, never staying in one city for too long." Nicholas's heart raced. Victor Talbot, a name that had been whispered in the shadows of high society, a man with connections so deep that crossing him could be fatal. Nicholas had heard the name before, but he never imagined Rebecca had been involved with someone like him. What did she find out? Nicholas asked, his voice low and tense. What could be so important that Talbot would go to these lengths to hunt you down? Lily shook her head. I don't know. She died before she could tell me. All I know is that she was terrified, more terrified than I'd ever seen her. And now, after she's gone, Talbot's men are after me. They think I have whatever it is she found, and they want the baby. They think he's the key to something. I don't know what, but they won't stop until they get him." Nicholas sat back, his mind racing. He had been pulled into something far more dangerous than he ever anticipated. Talbot wasn't just after revenge. He was after something specific, something that Rebecca had hidden, something that now seemed tied to Lily and the baby. "Where's the baby's father in all of this?" Nicholas asked carefully, knowing it was a sensitive question. Lily's face darkened, her expression hardening. "He's dead," she said flatly. "Killed by the same people who are after me now." Nicholas felt a wave of dread wash over him. Whoever these people were, they were ruthless. If they had already killed once, they wouldn't hesitate to do it again. He glanced at the baby, sleeping peacefully in Lily's arms, unaware of the storm raging around him. "Lily, we need to figure out what your mother knew," Nicholas said, his voice urgent. "If we don't, these people are going to keep coming after you. And I don't know if I can protect you from them if we don't understand what we're up against." Lily shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "I don't know how to stop them. I don't know where to look. My mom, she never told me anything. She just said to keep running. But I'm so tired, Nicholas. I've been running for so long." Nicholas felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was just a kid, barely an adult, and yet she had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "You don't have to run anymore," he said softly. "Not alone. We'll figure this out together." Lily looked at him, her eyes filled with both hope and doubt. "Why are you helping me? After everything, why do you care now?" Nicholas swallowed hard. "Because I should have cared a long time ago. I failed your mother, but I'm not going to fail you. Not this time." Lily's lip trembled, and she looked down, blinking away tears. "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. Every time I think I'm safe, it all falls apart." "You can trust me," Nicholas said, his voice steady. "I won't let them hurt you. Not again." For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound in the room the soft breathing of the baby. But just as Nicholas was about to say more, the doorbell rang again, the sharp sound cutting through the quiet like a blade. Both Nicholas and Lily froze, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared fear. They knew who it was. Jessica Harper and the police had returned. Time had run out. "I need to go talk to them," Nicholas said, standing up quickly. "Stay here. Keep the baby safe." "I'll handle this." Lily nodded, her eyes wide with fear, clutching the baby tightly to her chest. Nicholas walked toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew this wasn't just a visit. They were here to take Lily and the baby, and there was no more time to delay. But as he reached for the door handle, a thought struck him. Rebecca had known something dangerous, something important. She had spent years running from it, hiding from it. And now, that burden had fallen on Lily and this innocent child. Nicholas wasn't sure if he was prepared for the storm that was about to break, but one thing was clear. He had made a promise to protect them, and he wasn't going to break that promise. As he opened the door and faced Jessica and the officer, Nicholas knew that everything was about to change, and he wasn't sure if any of them would survive it. The knock on the door echoed through the mansion, each sound reverberating off the cold marble floors like a distant drum. Nicholas hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob, his pulse quickening. Behind him, the weight of the world seemed to rest on Lily's fragile shoulders as she clutched the baby tighter, her wide eyes glued to his back, silently pleading for a solution. He opened the door to face Jessica Harper and the officer once again. The evening had grown darker, the looming figures standing on the doorstep framed by the dim glow of the porch lights. Jessica's face was stern, determined, while the officer beside her looked equally unyielding, his hand resting on his belt as if preparing for an escalation. "Nicholas," Jessica started, her voice cutting through the thick silence, "I'm sorry, but we can't delay this any longer. We need to take Lily and the baby into custody for their safety and for the ongoing investigation. This is out of your hands now." Nicholas felt a surge of protectiveness rise within him. He knew the law was closing in, but his gut told him there was more to this than met the eye. more than what Jessica and the police understood. He couldn't let them take Lily, not until he knew the full truth. His mind raced, grasping for a plan that would buy them more time. "I understand the urgency," Nicholas said calmly, though his heartbeat thundered in his ears. "But I need to speak to Lily one last time before you take her away. There are things she hasn't told anyone yet, things that might change how you approach this case." Jessica raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Nicholas, this isn't a negotiation." "It's not a negotiation," Nicholas interrupted, his voice firm. "But if you really care about the safety of that baby, you'll want to hear what she has to say. Give me 10 minutes. The officer shifted uncomfortably, but Jessica glanced at him before reluctantly nodding. 10 minutes. And then we take her in. No more delays." Nicholas turned and hurried back inside, closing the door behind him. Lily was standing near the fireplace now, her eyes filled with panic, her knuckles white as she held the baby protectively. "What's happening?" she whispered, fear cracking through her voice. "They're going to take him, aren't they?" "Not if I can help it," Nicholas said, moving swiftly toward her. He lowered his voice. "Listen to me, Lily. They're running out of patience. If we don't give them something now, they'll take you and the baby, and once you're in their system, I won't be able to protect you." Lily's eyes were wide, her breathing shallow. "But I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what my mother was hiding." Nicholas stared at her for a moment, trying to piece together the puzzle of Rebecca's life. He knew Talbot was after something valuable enough to send his men after a child and kill to get it. But what was it? Nicholas had to think. Rebecca hadn't trusted many people, and she wouldn't have told Lily everything, especially not something dangerous. "Is there anywhere your mother kept things hidden?" Nicholas asked, his voice low but urgent. "Somewhere she kept documents, letters, anything that might give us a clue?" Lily bit her lip, thinking hard. There was a box," she said slowly, as if the memory was forming in real time. "Mom kept it locked in the attic of the last house we lived in before we had to leave. I remember asking her about it once, but she said it wasn't safe to talk about, that it was the reason we were always running." Nicholas's heart leapt. That could be it. Whatever's in that box might be what Talbot's after. "But we left that house years ago," Lily said, her voice shaking with frustration. "I don't even know if it's still there." "We have to assume it is," Nicholas said, his voice growing more resolute. "We'll need to find it before Talbot does. It's the only way we'll have leverage." Lily looked at him, her face pale with fear and exhaustion. "How? I don't even know where to start." "I'll start making calls," Nicholas said. "We'll track down the address and go from there. But right now, we need to give Jessica something to buy us time." Lily's face twisted in anguish. "What am I supposed to tell her?" "Tell her about Victor Talbot," Nicholas said, his voice hardening. "Tell her the truth, that he's the one chasing you, that the baby is in danger because of him. It's the only way to make them see that this is bigger than just a kidnapping." Lily hesitated, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She looked down at the baby, whose tiny face rested against her chest, completely oblivious to the chaos surrounding him. "I don't want him involved in this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I know," Nicholas said gently, "but this is the only way to keep him safe. You don't have to give them everything, just enough to show them that they're not dealing with a simple case of abduction. Trust me, Lily. It's the only chance we've got." She swallowed hard, then nodded, her face determined despite the tears. "Okay, I'll tell them." Nicholas felt a surge of relief, but he knew they weren't out of danger yet. Time was running out, and the weight of the situation pressed down on him like a vice. He placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "You're stronger than you think, Lily. We'll get through this." As he opened the door again, Jessica and the officer were still standing there, their patience clearly thinning. Jessica looked at Nicholas expectantly, her expression unreadable. "She's ready to talk," Nicholas said, stepping aside to let them in. Lily stood in the middle of the room, her arms wrapped tightly around the baby, her face pale but resolute. Jessica approached her slowly, her eyes softening for a moment as she saw the raw emotion in the young girl's face. "Lily," Jessica said gently, "I know you're scared, but I need you to trust me. We want to help you and the baby, but we need the truth." Lily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper as she began to speak. "His name is Victor Talbot. He's the one you need to worry about, not me." Jessica's eyes widened, and she exchanged a quick glance with the officer. "Victor Talbot? The businessman?" "He's not just a businessman," Lily continued, her voice shaking. "He's dangerous. He's been after us for years. My mom, she knew something that could ruin him. He thinks I have it, or that the baby is the key, but I don't. I swear, I don't know where it is." Jessica's face hardened, and she nodded slowly, processing the information. "This changes things," she murmured, glancing at the officer. "Victor Talbot is not someone we take lightly." Nicholas watched as Jessica took a deep breath, her expression now filled with a mix of concern and urgency. "We're going to look into this," she said, her tone now more empathetic. "But I still need to take you and the baby into protective custody until we can sort this out." Lily's face crumpled, but before she could protest, Nicholas stepped forward. "What if I can guarantee their safety?" he asked, his voice firm. "I have the resources to protect them, at least until we figure out what Talbot's endgame is. Let me take responsibility for them." Jessica hesitated, clearly torn. "Nicholas, this is highly irregular." "I'm not asking for a free pass," Nicholas interrupted. "I'm asking for time. Give me 48 hours. If we can't figure this out by then, I'll bring her in myself." Jessica stared at him for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she sighed, nodding reluctantly. 48 hours, Nicholas. But after that, they're coming with us. No exceptions." Nicholas nodded, his mind already racing ahead, formulating a plan. As Jessica and the officer left the mansion, the weight of what lay ahead settled over him. The clock was ticking, and now it wasn't just about protecting Lily. It was about outwitting a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Turning back to Lily, Nicholas felt a renewed sense of urgency. They had 48 hours to find the answers. 48 hours to stay ahead of Victor Talbot. And if they failed, no one would survive what was coming next. The night deepened, casting long shadows across the sprawling mansion as Nicholas Hayes stood at the large bay windows, staring out into the darkness. His mind was a storm of thoughts, each more unsettling than the last. Outside, the world was silent, but inside, the weight of his past and the danger that now surrounded them threatened to crush him. Behind him, Lily sat on the couch, her fingers trembling as she held the baby close. She hadn't said much since Jessica and the officer had left, granting them a precious but perilous 48 hours. The clock was ticking, and Nicholas knew that every second mattered. He had to find out the truth, not just about Rebecca's past, but about his own role in the chain of events that had led to this moment. Nicholas turned from the window, his gaze settling on Lily, who was staring at the baby's tiny face, her expression lost in thought. He had seen that look before, in Rebecca's eyes years ago. It was the same mixture of fear, exhaustion, and guarded hope. He took a breath, his voice breaking the tense silence. "Lily," he began softly, "there's something I need to ask you. Something important." Lily looked up, her eyes red and weary. "What is it?" Nicholas hesitated for a moment, unsure how to begin, but the time for half-truths was over. They couldn't afford to hide from the past any longer. "It's about your mother, about Rebecca." At the mention of her mother's name, Lily's face tightened, her grip on the baby tightening slightly. Nicholas moved closer, his tone gentle but insistent. "I know you blame me for leaving her," Nicholas continued, his voice filled with regret. "And you're right. I wasn't there when she needed me. But there's something I've been trying to figure out, something that's been haunting me since I found out who you were." Lily's eyes flickered with a mix of curiosity and pain. "What do you want to know?" Nicholas sat down across from her, leaning forward. "Did your mother ever talk about why I left? Did she ever tell you the full story?" Lily looked away, her jaw clenching. "She didn't have to tell me. I know why you left. You didn't care about us. You cared more about your money, your career." Nicholas winced at her words, feeling the sting of the truth behind them. But he shook his head, determined to make her understand. "It wasn't just that. Yes, I was ambitious and I made mistakes. But Rebecca, Your mother, she made decisions that I didn't understand at the time. She got involved with dangerous people, people like Victor Talbot. I couldn't see a way out. Lily's gaze snapped back to his, her eyes sharp with accusation. So you ran. I thought I was protecting her, Nicholas admitted, his voice strained. I thought that by walking away, I was keeping her safe from the life I had chosen. But I was wrong. I see that now. Lily's expression softened slightly, but the hurt remained. You didn't protect her. You left her to deal with it on her own. Nicholas nodded, the weight of her words crushing him. I know, and I've been carrying that guilt ever since. But there's something else, something I don't understand. Why didn't she ever reach out? After all these years, why didn't she come to me for help? Lily let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Because she didn't trust you. After you left, she didn't trust anyone. She thought you'd turn your back on her again. And maybe she was right. Nicholas felt the sharp stab of those words, but he didn't flinch. I can't change the past, Lily, but I need to know. Did she ever tell you what she was hiding? What she knew that made Talbot chase her for so many years? Lily's eyes darkened, her expression becoming distant. She didn't tell me much, just that there were things she had to keep secret, that she had to protect me, but she never told me what it was. Only that it was dangerous, and that I should never let anyone know where we were. Nicholas frowned, leaning back in his chair, his mind racing. There has to be more. She must have left something behind. Something that could explain why Talbot is so desperate to find you. Lily shook her head, her frustration clear. I've told you everything I know. We moved so many times, and she was always paranoid. She never stayed in one place for long, never trusted anyone. Nicholas stood up, pacing the room as his thoughts swirled. But she must have had a plan. She wasn't the type of woman to leave things to chance. Lily watched him, her eyes narrowing. What are you saying? I'm saying that your mother was smarter than anyone gave her credit for, Nicholas replied, stopping to face her. She was always 2 steps ahead. If she knew Talbot was coming after her, she would have made sure to leave something behind, some clue or protection for you. Lily's brow furrowed, her mind working through the possibilities. You think she left something for me? It's possible, Nicholas said. You mentioned a locked box earlier, hidden in the attic of one of your old houses. That could be it. She might have hidden whatever it was there. But that house was years ago, Lily said, her voice trembling with uncertainty. We haven't been back since we ran. Nicholas's jaw tightened. Then we need to find it. It's our only lead, and it's the only way we can figure out what's really going on. Lily looked down at the baby in her arms, her face a mask of uncertainty. But what if it's not there? What if it's all for nothing? We won't know unless we try, Nicholas said firmly. I'll make some calls, see if I can track down the house and its current owners. But we need to act fast. Talbot's men could be watching us, and if they figure out where we're headed, they'll get there first. Lily hesitated, her fear evident in her eyes. But she nodded, knowing that they had no other choice. Okay, let's do it. Nicholas moved quickly, grabbing his phone and dialing the number of a trusted contact, a private investigator he had worked with in the past. As the phone rang, Nicholas's thoughts raced ahead. If Rebecca had left something behind, it could be their only bargaining chip, something valuable enough to give them leverage against Talbot, something powerful enough to stop the relentless pursuit. Henry, Nicholas said when the line finally connected. I need a favor. I'm looking for an address, an old house. It belonged to Rebecca Bennett, but I don't know if it's still in her name. Can you track it down? The investigator on the other end was sharp, efficient, and within minutes, he had an answer. I've got it, Henry said, his voice crackling through the phone. The house is still in her name. It's on the outskirts of town, hasn't been sold since she bought it. Nicholas felt a surge of relief. Thanks, Henry. I owe you one. As he hung up, he turned to Lily. We found it. The house is still in your mother's name. Lily's eyes widened with both hope and fear. What now? We go there, Nicholas said, his voice resolute. Tonight. Lily looked at him, her face pale but determined. Okay, let's finish this. As Nicholas prepared for the journey ahead, the looming shadows of his past seemed to grow larger. The house, Rebecca's secrets, and the truth that had been buried for so long. All of it was waiting for them. But Nicholas knew one thing. Whatever they found in that house could change everything, and it might be their last chance to survive. The drive to the house was tense, the quiet hum of the car's engine the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. Nicholas gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as the headlights cut through the dark, winding road. The mansion they had just left behind was now a distant memory, and ahead of them lay the shadowed remnants of Rebecca's past, the house where secrets had been buried and danger had taken root. Beside him, Lily sat in the passenger seat, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the baby nestled in her arms. She hadn't spoken much since they left, the weight of their mission pressing down on her. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper, and Lily gently rocked him, her fingers brushing his tiny forehead with a tenderness that belied the terror racing through her mind. "Are you okay?" Nicholas asked, glancing at her as the road curved ahead. Lily didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were distant, lost in memories of the home they were returning to, a place she thought she'd never see again. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what we're going to find there, but I have this feeling that whatever it is, it's going to change everything." Nicholas swallowed hard. He felt the same unease gnawing at him, as if they were driving towards something that was far larger and more dangerous than either of them could comprehend. He wasn't just confronting a house. They were confronting a past filled with shadows, betrayal, and the long tendrils of Victor Talbot's reach. As they neared the outskirts of town, the landscape grew more rural, the city lights fading behind them. The road became narrower, surrounded by thick, overgrown trees that seemed to swallow the car's headlights. And then, through the dense foliage, Nicholas spotted it, the house. It stood on a slight hill, its silhouette barely visible in the moonlight. Time had not been kind to it. The once well-maintained home was now a decrepit shell, the windows dark and broken, the roof sagging under the weight of neglect. Nicholas slowed the car to a stop just outside the overgrown driveway, his breath catching in his throat. He had expected the house to look abandoned, but seeing it now, a shiver ran down his spine. The air around it seemed heavy, almost suffocating. "This is it," he said quietly, turning off the engine. Lily stared at the house, her face ashen. "I didn't think I'd ever come back here," she whispered. "So many memories, but all of them tainted with fear." Nicholas reached out and touched her hand briefly. "We're not alone this time. Whatever we find in there, we'll face it together." Lily nodded, but her grip tightened on the baby, her body trembling with anticipation. They stepped out of the car, the cold night air biting at their skin as they made their way toward the house. The crunch of gravel beneath their feet was unnervingly loud in the silence, each step a reminder of the danger they were walking into. Nicholas paused at the front door, which was slightly ajar, its rusted hinges groaning as it swayed in the wind. He pushed it open slowly, revealing the dark interior of the house. Dust and decay hung thick in the air, the smell of mold and damp wood suffusing the space. It felt as though the house itself had been waiting for them, holding its breath all these years. "Where's the attic?" Nicholas asked, his voice hushed, as if afraid of disturbing the silence. Lily pointed down a narrow hallway. "It's upstairs." At the end of the hall, they moved carefully through the darkened rooms, the creaking floorboards beneath their feet echoing like whispers of the past. Every step felt heavy, burdened by the memories that clung to the walls. As they reached the staircase, Nicholas's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, lurking in the shadows just beyond sight. At the top of the stairs, they found the attic door. It was small and nondescript, tucked away in the corner, almost as if it had been intentionally hidden. Nicholas tried the handle. It was locked. He cursed under his breath, realizing they hadn't thought to bring anything to force it open. "Wait," Lily said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small, tarnished key. "My mom gave me this before we left. I never knew what it was for, but maybe—" Her hands trembled as she inserted the key into the lock. There was a click, and the door creaked open, revealing a steep set of wooden stairs leading up into the darkness. Nicholas felt his heart race. Whatever was up there, they were about to find out. They climbed the stairs slowly, the old wood groaning under their weight. At the top, the attic opened up into a large, dimly lit space, the only light coming from the moon that filtered through cracks in the roof. Dust swirled in the air, and the room was cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and forgotten relics of a life long abandoned. Nicholas scanned the room, his eyes searching for any sign of the box Lily had mentioned. "Where did your mother keep it?" he asked, his voice hushed. Lily walked forward, stepping carefully over the debris. "Over there," she said, pointing to a large wooden chest pushed into the far corner of the attic. She always kept it hidden under blankets. Nicholas moved toward the chest, pulling away the layers of dusty fabric that had been draped over it for years. The wood was worn, its edges splintered, but the lock on it was still intact. With a deep breath, he reached for the lock, but before he could touch it, Lily spoke, her voice shaking. "Wait," she said, her eyes wide. What if opening this makes things worse?" Nicholas paused, looking back at her. "We have to know, Lily. Whatever your mother was hiding, it's the reason Talbot's after you. It's the reason we're all in danger. We can't turn back now." Lily swallowed hard, then nodded, her face pale but resolute. With that, Nicholas broke the lock with a hard tug, and the chest creaked open. Inside, they found what looked like old papers, letters, and documents. Nicholas pulled them out, sifting through the contents. Some were bank statements, others appeared to be legal documents, contracts, ownership papers, but none of it made sense until they found the folder. It was thin, yellowed with age, but inside it was a single document that made Nicholas's blood run cold. He read the words, his heart pounding in his chest as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. "It's a paternity test," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The baby, it's Talbot's." Lily's face drained of all color. "What? No, that's not possible." Nicholas held up the paper, his hand trembling. "It's a test, confirming Talbot is the father. This is why he's after the baby. It's not just revenge. He's trying to take back his son." Lily stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock. "But my mother never told me. She never said anything about this." "It's all here," Nicholas said, sifting through more documents. "Your mother knew, but she hid it from him. She must have run when she found out who Talbot really was. She wanted to protect you and the baby." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as the reality of the situation sank in. "He's been after me because of this? Because of him?" Nicholas nodded grimly. "It explains everything. Talbot doesn't care about the money or the secrets. He wants his child, and he'll stop at nothing to get him." Lily sank to the floor, clutching the baby to her chest, her whole body trembling with fear. "What are we going to do? He'll never stop coming for us." Nicholas knelt beside her, his face etched with determination. "We'll stop him. We have proof now, proof of what he's after. We can use this against him." But even as he spoke the words, Nicholas knew the storm was about to break. Talbot wouldn't just back down. And now that they knew the truth, the danger was closer than ever. The dark secret had been revealed, but with it came a new, terrifying reality. And the clock was still ticking. Lily sat on the cold attic floor, her body trembling as she clutched the baby tightly against her chest. Nicholas knelt beside her, the worn paternity test in his hands, the name Victor Talbot etched into their reality like a knife's edge. The enormity of the revelation weighed heavy in the air, thicker than the dust that swirled around them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was no longer just fear. It was grief, loss, and the realization that everything had been a lie. Lily's mother had hidden this secret for so many years, protecting them from the monstrous truth. And now, that truth had come crashing down on them with brutal finality. Lily's breath hitched, her voice barely above a whisper as she stared at the paternity document. "All this time, I thought my mother was running from something else. I thought she was protecting me, but it was him. She was protecting him." Nicholas placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft but resolute. "She was protecting both of you. She knew what Talbot was capable of. And now we know too." Lily shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks as she rocked the baby gently. But why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she prepare me for this? I thought I was protecting my son from people trying to hurt him. I didn't know. Her voice cracked, and the words seemed to catch in her throat. Nicholas tightened his grip on her shoulder, his own emotions swirling. She did what she thought was right, Lily. She kept you in the dark because she knew the danger. If Talbot had found out, if he had known you were carrying his child, things could have been even worse. Lily's body trembled with a mixture of anger, fear, and sorrow. But now he knows. He knows everything. Nicholas felt the tension of the moment, the crushing weight of what lay ahead. They had unearthed the truth, but with it came a terrifying consequence. They were no longer just running from a dangerous man. They were running from a father who would stop at nothing to claim his son. And Talbot had the resources to do it. The baby let out a soft, sleepy murmur, and Lily looked down at him, her face filled with anguish. What do we do now? How do we protect him? Nicholas stood slowly, pacing the small, cluttered attic as he tried to think. We have leverage now, he said, gesturing toward the document in his hand. This test? It proves the baby's paternity, but it also proves Talbot has been lying about his intentions. He's not trying to reclaim his son legally. He's been hunting you like an animal. This could destroy him if it gets out. But he's so powerful, Lily whispered, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. How can we use this against him without him coming after us even harder? Nicholas stopped pacing, turning to face her. We won't go after him directly. Not yet. First, we need to get somewhere safe. Somewhere where he can't reach you. I have contacts. People who can help us disappear, if only for a while. Lily looked at him, uncertainty clouding her expression. Disappear? You think that will work? He's already found me once. He'll find me again. Nicholas knelt back down in front of her, looking her in the eyes. We can buy time, Lily. Time to figure out our next move. Time to plan. But right now, you and the baby are in danger, and I won't let him get his hands on either of you. Her lips quivered, and for the first time, Nicholas saw something in her expression shift, something that wasn't fear or anger. It was trust, fragile and hesitant, but trust nonetheless. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice trembling. You don't owe me anything. You could have just let them take me, but instead, you're risking everything. Why? Nicholas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of guilt pressing down on him. Because I should have been there for your mother. I should have protected her when she needed me, and I failed. But I'm not going to fail you. I won't make the same mistake again. Lily's eyes shimmered with tears, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she seemed to understand the depth of Nicholas's regret and the sincerity behind his actions. I'm scared, she admitted softly, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to do this on my own. You don't have to, Nicholas replied gently. We'll do this together. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Lily's lips, but it was fleeting, weighed down by the crushing uncertainty that surrounded them. She looked down at the baby again, who had fallen asleep in her arms, oblivious to the chaos swirling around him. What about the police? Lily asked, her voice laced with hesitation. They'll come looking for me soon. And Jessica? She'll want answers. Nicholas nodded grimly. We'll have to deal with that too. But for now, the most important thing is getting you out of here safely. If we can disappear before Talbot makes his next move, we'll have a fighting chance. Lily's face paled as she processed the gravity of their situation. She had been running her whole life, first with her mother, and then on her own. And now, with her child's life on the line, she was about to do it all over again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Nicholas stood and helped her to her feet, careful not to disturb the baby. We'll take only what we need, he said, his voice calm but urgent. We can't stay here long. Talbot's men might already be tracking us. Lily nodded, but her hands were shaking as she gathered herself, trying to maintain composure. What about the documents? She asked, gesturing toward the pile of papers they had found in the chest. Should we take them with us? Yes, Nicholas said, stuffing the papers into his coat. These are our only leverage against Talbot. We'll keep them safe until we can figure out our next move. With everything gathered, They made their way back down the attic stairs, moving swiftly through the dark, empty house. The air inside felt colder now, as if the secrets they had uncovered had seeped into the very walls, staining them with the weight of their revelation. As they reached the front door, Nicholas stopped, looking back at the house one last time. It felt strange to leave it behind. The place that had once been Rebecca's sanctuary, now a haunted relic of a life lost. But there was no time for sentiment. They had to go. "Lily," Nicholas said, turning to her with a sense of urgency. "We have to move quickly. Talbot won't stop. We can't afford to wait." Lily nodded, her face set in determination, but her eyes flickered with doubt. "Where will we go?" "I have a safe house. It's off the grid," Nicholas said, leading her out into the cold night air. "We'll be safe there for a while, long enough to come up with a plan." The sky above was a canvas of dark clouds, heavy with the threat of a storm. As they climbed into the car, Nicholas felt a sense of foreboding settle over him. They had uncovered the truth, but with that truth came danger. And now, the real fight was just beginning. He started the engine, the headlights cutting through the darkness as they sped away from the house, leaving behind the secrets of the past but carrying with them the weight of what had been revealed. Lily looked out the window, her face illuminated by the passing streetlights. "Do you really think we can stop him?" she asked, her voice quiet, as if she was afraid to even hope. Nicholas glanced at her, his jaw set with determination. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. We're not running anymore. We're going to face this head-on." The car roared down the empty road, the baby sleeping soundly in the back seat, unaware of the storm that was closing in. And as the night swallowed them, Nicholas knew that everything was about to change. The rain began to fall just as they reached the safe house, a small, secluded cabin nestled deep within the woods, far from prying eyes. The downpour came swiftly, heavy and relentless, as if the storm that had been building all around them had finally broken loose. The world outside was a blur of shadows and rain, but inside the cabin, the air was thick with the tension of the secrets they carried. Nicholas parked the car under a canopy of trees, the headlights casting long, eerie shadows across the dirt road. The baby stirred in the back seat, waking from his sleep with a soft whimper as the rain pounded against the roof. Lily, still clutching him close, turned to Nicholas, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. "Is this place safe?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. Nicholas nodded. "It's the safest place I know. No one will find us here. Not even Talbot." Lily gave a small, tired nod, though the fear still lingered in her eyes. The weight of the last few days had taken its toll on her, but she was stronger now, determined, resolute. The revelation of the baby's paternity had shaken her to her core, but it had also given her something she hadn't had in a long time: clarity. She knew now what she was up against, and she wasn't running anymore. They stepped out into the rain, Nicholas shielding Lily and the baby as they made their way to the cabin's front door. The cabin was old but sturdy, with thick wooden walls and a small porch that offered some shelter from the storm. Inside, it was sparsely furnished, just a few pieces of worn furniture, a kitchen, and a fireplace that crackled softly in the corner, offering a small warmth against the cold outside. Lily placed the baby in a makeshift crib that Nicholas had set up in the corner of the room, then collapsed onto the couch, the weight of everything finally catching up to her. Nicholas watched her for a moment, seeing how fragile she looked, despite the strength she had shown. He moved to the fireplace, throwing a few more logs onto the flames, trying to bring some warmth into the room. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sound of the rain outside and the crackling of the fire filled the silence. But the unspoken truth hung in the air between them. Victor Talbot was still out there, and the storm hadn't passed yet. Lily broke the silence, her voice quiet but steady. "What now, Nicholas? We have the proof. We know the truth. But how do we stop him? He's too powerful." Nicholas sat down across from her, the flickering firelight casting shadows across his face. "We stop him by using the only thing he cares about against him: his reputation. Talbot thrives on control, on power. He's built his entire empire on fear, manipulation, and secrets. If we expose what he's done, if we show the world what kind of man he truly is, his power will crumble. But he's already gotten away with so much, Lily said, shaking her head. What makes you think this will be any different? Because this time, we have leverage, Nicholas said firmly. He pulled the paternity test from his jacket, holding it up for her to see. This document, combined with the other evidence we found in your mother's chest, paints a very clear picture. Talbot fathered a child, and instead of claiming him through legal means, he's been hunting you down, willing to kill anyone who gets in his way. We take this to the press, to the authorities, and he'll have nowhere to hide. Lily stared at the document, her mind racing. But won't that put us in even more danger? If he finds out we're going public with this, he'll be desperate, Nicholas admitted. More dangerous than ever. But that's also his weakness. Desperation makes people sloppy. He'll make mistakes. And when he does, we'll be ready. Lily took a deep breath, her fear battling with the flicker of hope that Nicholas's words stirred inside her. And what if it's not enough? What if he still comes after the baby? Then I'll protect you, Nicholas said, his voice low but filled with conviction. I made a promise to your mother that I'd protect her, and I failed. But I won't fail you, Lily. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you and your son safe. Tears welled in Lily's eyes, but she blinked them away, nodding slowly. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. Let's bring him down. Nicholas stood, moving to the kitchen where he pulled out his phone. He had already prepared for this moment, lining up contacts in the media and law enforcement who were willing to expose Talbot's web of corruption. With a few quick calls, the wheels were in motion. Within hours, the documents would be in the hands of reporters, investigators, people who could take down a man like Talbot. But as the calls were made, a gnawing tension settled in Nicholas's gut. This was the end game, and it wouldn't be long before Talbot realized the trap was closing in on him. He wouldn't go down without a fight. The storm outside intensified, the wind howling through the trees as if reflecting the storm building inside each of them. Nicholas moved back to the living room, watching the rain lash against the windows. Lily was still on the couch, her eyes fixed on the baby, who had fallen asleep, blissfully unaware of the danger that hovered over them. Suddenly, there was a noise, faint but unmistakable, the crunch of gravel, the headlights of a car pulling up outside. Nicholas froze, his heart pounding. He motioned for Lily to stay quiet, moving quickly to the window. Through the rain-slicked glass, he saw a sleek black car pulling to a stop at the edge of the property. Two figures stepped out, their silhouettes barely visible in the downpour. They found us, Nicholas whispered, his voice tense. Stay here, don't move. Lily's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. Nicholas, what are we going to do? He grabbed a gun from a hidden drawer by the door, his mind racing. I'll handle it. Just keep the baby safe. The door to the cabin creaked open, and Nicholas stepped out into the storm, the rain immediately soaking through his clothes. The two figures approached, one of them unmistakably Victor Talbot. Talbot's face was calm, but his eyes burned with fury. You really thought you could hide from me, Nicholas? You thought I wouldn't find you? Nicholas tightened his grip on the gun, but kept it low at his side. It's over, Talbot. I have the evidence. It's already in the hands of the press. There's no escape for you this time. Talbot smiled coldly, taking a step closer. You think I care about evidence? I built my empire on secrets, Nicholas. There's nothing you can say or do that will destroy me. Nicholas felt the tension between them like a live wire, the storm raging around them. You won't win this time, Talbot. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about your son. For the first time, Talbot's expression faltered. He took another step forward, his voice lowering. My son is mine, Nicholas, and I will take him back. Nicholas shook his head. Not this time. He's not a pawn in your game anymore. Lily and I will protect him. You'll never see him again. Talbot's eyes darkened, his hand inching toward his jacket. But before he could make a move, the sound of police sirens cut through the storm, their lights flashing through the trees. Talbot's face twisted in anger, realizing he had lost. Nicholas stood his ground, watching as Talbot and his men retreated, the sirens growing louder, closer. As the police cars pulled into the driveway, Nicholas knew the fight was over. Talbot's empire was about to crumble, and his son, Lily's baby, would finally be safe. Nicholas turned back toward the cabin, rain dripping from his hair, his clothes soaked through. Inside, Lily stood at the window, the baby in her arms, watching with wide, tearful eyes. It was over. Nicholas walked back inside, his heart heavy but relieved. Lily looked at him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "Is it really over?" she whispered. Nicholas nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yes, it's over." Lily's shoulders sagged with relief, tears streaming down her face as she held the baby close. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Nicholas moved toward her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "We're in this together now." As the storm began to die down, and the cabin filled with the soft glow of the fire, Nicholas realized something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The past had been full of mistakes and regrets, but now, for the first time, there was a future waiting for them. And together, they would face it. The baby stirred in Lily's arms, and she smiled down at him, the storm outside finally giving way to peace.